When we think of Vikings, we usually picture two things. First, the bloodthirsty raiders storming the coasts of England. And second, the brave explorers crossing the Atlantic to a new world. But there's a third Viking, a version hidden away in the marble corridors of the Mediterranean. This is the story of Vikings who didn't want to destroy an empire, but wanted to get paid to protect one. These were the Varangian Guard, the most feared, loyal, and strangely out-of-place warriors in the history of warfare. Imagine you a citizen of Constantinople in the year 1000. You live in the most sophisticated city on earth, the New Rome. While the rest of Europe is in mud huts, your city has paved streets, running water, and cathedrals made of gold. But your emperor is constantly looking over his shoulder. In a city of assassins and political coups, he can't trust his own soldiers. He needs men who have no stake in local politics, men loyal only to the gold in their pockets. So he looks north. The Varangians were Norsemen who didn't sail west to Britain, but south through the river systems of what is now Russia and Ukraine. They dragged their longships over land, fought off nomadic tribes, and eventually reached the city of gold, Constantinople. To these Vikings, the city was so massive, so incomprehensible, they simply called it Miklagard, the Great City. To join the Guard, a Norseman often had to pay an entry fee, essentially buying his position. This seemed strange for a mercenary, but it acted as a filter, ensuring only the most dedicated warriors applied. Once accepted, the recruit was sworn in through elaborate Byzantine rituals. They pledged their life directly to the emperor's person, not the state. This personal bond was the secret to their incorruptibility. While a local general might dream of the throne, a Varangian knew his paycheck depended entirely on the man wearing the purple. The deal was simple. The emperor gave them a life of unimaginable luxury, and in return they became his axe-bearing shadows. While the Roman elite wore silk and perfume, the Varangians stood at the palace gates in heavy mail, carrying massive, two-handed Dane axes that could split a horse in two with a single swing. But their story isn't just about standing guard. It's about the strategy of fear. The Byzantine Empire was a master of psychological warfare. When a rebel general or a foreign king saw a wall of 7 foot tall, blue-eyed giants who didn't speak the language and didn't care for bribes, they knew the game was over. The Varangians were the emperor's nuclear option. If a battle was being lost, the emperor would release the guard. They fought with a berserker fury that terrified the disciplined armies of the East. Despite their terrifying reputation, the locals of Constantinople had a less than intimidating nickname for them, the Emperor's Winebags. In the city's taverns, these Northmen were notorious for their ability to consume vast quantities of wine, a big change from the ale and mead of their homelands. But the Byzantines tolerated their rowdy behavior because of their discipline on the clock. A Varangian might spend his night in a drunken brawl, but by dawn he was standing motionless at the palace gates, his armor polished to a mirror sheen, the ultimate professional in an empire of chaos. The physical presence of the guard was pure theater. The Byzantine court was a place of extreme etiquette and hushed whispers, but the Varangians were a loud, clanking reminder of raw power. Standing a full head taller than the average Mediterranean citizen, dressed in gold-trimmed tunics, they were a human wall. Their silent, towering presence ensured that even the most ambitious senator thought twice before speaking out of turn. Perhaps the most incredible perk of the job was a tradition known as palutasverf, or the palace pillage. Whenever an emperor died, the Varangians were granted a unique privilege. They could run through the royal treasury and take as much gold and as many jewels as they could physically carry. This wasn't seen as looting, but as a final payment for their loyalty. It was this tradition that allowed men to return to Scandinavia with chests so heavy with gold that they laid the financial foundations for entire northern kingdoms. One of the most famous of them all was Harald Hardrada. Before he became the King of Norway, who died at the Battle of Stamford Bridge in 1066, he was a commander of the Varangian Guard. He spent a decade fighting in Sicily, North Africa, and Jerusalem, gathering so much wealth in Constantinople that when he finally returned home, he was one of the richest men in Europe. What makes this story so fascinating is the cultural collision. These were men from a culture of mead halls and wooden huts, now living in the height of Roman sophistication. We can even see their mark today. We found their graffiti carved into the marble of the Hagia Sophia. One Viking literally carved Halfdan was here into the stone of the world's most famous cathedral 1,000 years ago. As the centuries passed, the makeup of the Guard changed. After the Norman conquest of England in 1066, a massive influx of Anglo-Saxons fled their occupied homeland and traveled to Constantinople to join. These displaced Englishmen found a new life defending the new Rome against the very same Norman French Vikings who had taken their homes. This turned the Guard into a melting pot of northern warriors, a multinational brotherhood united by their exile and their service to the Greek-speaking world. Beyond the battlefield, the Varangians left their mark on the very soul of the city. While the Byzantines viewed them as barbarians, the Vikings were deeply moved by the grandeur of Orthodox Christianity. Many returned to the north carrying not just gold, but icons, silk, and stories of the majestic Hagia Sophia. This cultural exchange was a silent conveyor belt of civilization. The high culture of the Mediterranean was carried back to the frozen fjords, forever altering the course of Scandinavian history. The Varangian Guard lasted for nearly 400 years. They were the ultimate mercenaries, a bridge between the Viking Age and the Roman Empire. They remind us that history isn't a collection of separate stories, but a story of movement, of a warrior from the fjords of Norway finding his fortune, his glory, and eventually his grave in the shadow of the Mediterranean sun. In the end, the Guard faded away not because they were defeated, but because the world changed. The Viking Age ended, and the Byzantine Empire slowly bled out. But for 4 centuries, the axe of the Northmen was the only thing keeping the light of Rome from going out. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this journey into a forgotten chapter of history, be sure to like this video and subscribe for more stories you didn't learn in school. See you next time.